Hi, and welcome back to Artificial Intelligence, Episode 3 for October 2017. My name is Bradley Metrock. I'm CEO of a company called Score Publishing based here in Nashville, Tennessee. Our sponsor for this podcast is VoiceXP, blazing the trail in voice technology. VoiceXP is taking the lead in developing Alexa skills for some of the best brands in the world. With VoiceXP, all you have to do is say it to revolutionize your marketing strategy. I encourage you to go and check them out at www.voicexp.com. We are very thrilled to have Dr. Peter Cahill with us today from Voysis. Peter, say hello.
Hi, Bradley. How are you?
I'm doing fine, Peter. So I got your name right, I assume.
Yes, perfect.
Excellent. It wouldn't be the first thing that I have messed up, but thank you very, very much for joining us today and sharing some of your insight and experience and expertise with us.
Thanks. Looking forward to it.
Sure. So let's start with, you've got a rich background in language, in voice, in speech. Share with me and the audience about your background and your educational background and your professional background and what led you up to starting Voysis.
I started working more so studying voice technology back in 2002, so about 15 years ago. And I think at the time, so I was studying computer science, just finishing up my undergraduate degree. And I think at the time that what attracted me to it was that it's a hard problem in comparison to a lot of the typical software engineering challenges that you'd encounter while in university. So if you had to use a database for something or build a website, there's very little technology risk there. The engineering challenges with it are very much more about architecture and building out something. But at the end of the day, you'd always know that it was possible to do so. Whereas in the case of voice technologies, you knew that you could build a very robotic sounding voice, or you could build a relatively inaccurate speech recognition system. But at that time, nobody had built highly accurate systems, not large teams and not small teams. I think that's what attracted me to it most. And so after I finished my undergraduate degree, I ended up going down the academic route and completing a PhD in the topic. And from that then, after a fairly short postdoc, I became faculty in a university in Ireland. And while I was faculty, I and six other academics here in Ireland attracted a fairly significant funding grant, which was about 17 million euros at the time. And that helped me broaden my experience in voice and language technologies considerably. Because up until that point, I'd mostly worked on text-to-speech, whereas once that happened, in that project, we worked on speech recognition. We still did text-to-speech. There was a very large team working on machine translation. There was teams working on many, many other topics and subtopics of language technologies. And after working on that for some years, within academic circles, I got elected to chair an academic group called SynthSig, which is the global speech synthesis academic group that anyone who works in academia in speech synthesis or in industry would all be members of that group, and that group organizes the annual conferences and so on. Around that time, this would have been maybe 2010, 2011, we started to see deep learning in products. So deep learning was pretty popular in research labs at the time, and some people had prototypes of deep learning-based voice recognition systems. And so we could see from that it was quite clear that it was going to be very transformative for the industry in general. And I think at that time, then we also saw the likes of Google, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft. All of them went on acquisition sprees, and they acquired pretty much any of the companies that existed out there in this space, which had a solid team behind them. Pretty much all of them got acquired around that time frame. At that time, I was looking at the landscape saying that there was no smaller companies to challenge these bigger guys anymore. And at the same time, it was quite clear from my connections in all these companies that it was quite clear that they were working on making their own platforms better. While there was this kind of consolidation, nobody was really coming to market making voice technologies available. So, a good example is even with Amazon Alexa, where there are skills available today, and you can add your own skills very easily, but you're still kind of limited in terms of what a skill can actually do. And so that motivated me to set up Voysis as an independent, complete voice AI platform, which could not just make the technologies available for everyone else, but also make it easy for people to actually use in their products.
Interesting. Yeah. So thank you for all of that insight. Obviously, this sector and this nexus of voice technology and artificial intelligence is deep in your blood. Give me the 30 to 60-second elevator pitch. And you were starting to get into it just there at the end of
Yeah.
that. Give me the 30 to 60-second elevator pitch of I am with company X. Let's say I'm with Delta Airlines and I want to have a voice assistant. I come to you. I ask you, what do you do? And you tell me what.
We build out solutions for particular verticals where we see voice can add a lot of value and the verticals are ready for them. So our primary focus right now is on e-commerce, so not quite travel. But in the case of either, what we would do is we'd make an automated platform available online through APIs where any company within that vertical could just push some of their data into our service. And behind the scenes then that'll trigger all of the AI models required, be it voice recognition, language understanding, dialogue, conversational type technologies. All of them will be either tuned towards the company's data or trained on the company's data. And so what the company actually gets access to then are APIs that are not generic cloud APIs, but instead are APIs that have been trained based on their data, designed for their use case. And so they end up with something that's very straightforward to integrate, but it's also highly accurate.
I'm fascinated by your approach, and let's roll with the Delta Airlines example for a minute, because it's travel, but let's just assume we're talking about their web portal where you'd go and buy a ticket. For this reason, that reason, or the other, what Amazon, Alexa is not sufficient, Google Assistant is not sufficient. We want our own voice assistant, and we want Voices to help us create that. Give me some insight into when the stuff that you're looking for in the data sets of the customer. Mm-hmm. So, are you looking for, I won't put words in your mouth. You tell me what y'all look for in the data sets as you start to get started creating a voice assistant or, an artificial intelligence backed voice technology for a client.
Sure. So I think at a very high level, we see that once you can define the use case, and generally modern AI technologies can work extremely well if the use case and the problem that you're asking them to solve is reasonably well defined. And in the case of something like travel, regardless of what airline you may interact with, the general use case is the same, that there's various tasks a user is going to want to complete when they interact with an airline. So the obvious ones are probably to check prices on tickets at certain dates or certain times. The user may then want to follow up about the availability of flights. So, for example, maybe I check if, how much is it to fly to New York next week? Then maybe I want to follow up and say, well, if I was to depart around 1 p.m., how much would it be then? Or even to check the availability of the flights. Maybe I want to constrain it to certain airlines. So there's a whole bunch of kind of different parameters I could provide as, the consumer of that technology in terms of, what dates I want to fly, what airlines I want to fly with, what class do I want to sit in, even like what's my seating preference. So that's kind of one category, which is kind of close to discovery and search. And at the same time, then you also have another side of it, which is kind of closer to customer service, where maybe I've booked a flight previously and I want to query certain details about that flight. What is the date of my flight? Can I check in online? Are there restrictions on the weight of my luggage? How many bags can I check in? And these types of queries. Well, regardless of the airline in question, it's the same set of queries that are valid for pretty much all of them. And so that's kind of our motivation to focus on a particular vertical, because it's possible to define it well. It's possible to build a highly accurate, fully automated solution around it. The information we can get from the airline itself, that's useful, is in many cases it's maybe the names of the airports they fly into. Traditionally, most modern language technologies can struggle when dealing with the names of places, as you would have witnessed in the various iterations of voice-based navigation systems. That saying the names of streets and cities can be quite difficult, and if the airline can provide us with the names of the airports they fly into, then that helps us adjust our models in a way that all of the airports they fly into are, integrated into the system.
The magic of being able to integrate data into a product like what Voisis offers, it's not so much having a gigantic data set. Everybody's got a gigantic data set. It's the magic is knowing what things to exclude.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when we build these systems, it's not that we just use data off the customer. We have enormous amounts of data ourselves that we combine with the data they provide. And so we don't expect large data sets off the customer. And we also never expect that to have audio recordings of the data sets either. So it's just a case that they need to provide the text of, be it their airports or their products or whichever.
Sure. No, that's great. So Voysis raised $8 million earlier this year. Congratulations on that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So what is that allowing you to do? And what are Voysis's short-term goals, heading, toward the end of 2017, heading into 2018?
So we used most of that capital to grow the team. So as you can imagine, for the very fairly broad range of voice and natural language technologies that we develop, and because we tune all the models for a domain, it requires us to have all of the technologies in-house. So we don't, depend on some generic black box cloud service that's outside of our control. The full stack of technologies have been developed in the company, and so naturally, with that, we need to have a fairly sizable team, and in practice, I think a constantly growing team to accommodate the requirements we have there. And so a lot of the 8 million is being used to scale the size of the team in the company, in addition to build out our brand further and engage with more partners at a single point in time. Later this year, we're releasing our product called Voysis Commerce, which is a fully automated solution for any e-commerce company to be able to create a voice AI that can talk to their customers about their products, help people find products, order products, etc. And it's a fully automated solution. So when anyone signs up and pushes their product data into the service, in a matter of hours, they have this voice AI available that they can integrate into their product and ship.
Wow. Okay. That's that's cool.
We're really looking forward to getting that out the door.
Yeah, I bet you are. That's great. And you said that's coming before the end of the year?
Yep, absolutely.
Interesting. Very, very cool. So I think it's a reality of this sector, this voice technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning sort of universe, that you've got your big players, as you mentioned earlier, your Amazon, your Microsoft, your Apple, your Samsung, all of those who are creating sort of mainstream experiences. But then you've got a lot of other players, and I'm sure Voysis fits into this as well, that the insights that you provide and the experience that you provide for your clients' customers is one thing. But then another part of the value proposition that you bring to the table is enhanced privacy and security. Can you talk to me about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of people do have concerns about how their data is being used, rightfully so, I think. And I think in the case of Voysis anyway, so later next year, I think it's in May next year, there are some new regulations in Europe which are very, very strict on what companies can do with data. And it's called GDPR. And even when we launched Voysis Commerce this year, we're already fully compliant with that. And it's a very strict set of regulations about how customers' data is handled. And so with that, anyone who's using any Voysis-based solution can directly log into Voysis, or maybe perhaps even through the company they're directly speaking to, and request for all of their data to be deleted or to view all of the data that the company has. And so the end user gets full control and full visibility into any data that's from them.
Yeah, so that's very appealing. And so that's legislation that's on the books now in Europe?
It's already fully defined, and then Europe allowed some time for companies to become compliant. But we're already fully compliant with that. And I do think in some cases, this data can help companies understand their customers better and build better products as a result. But naturally, there's also a threshold with it, and you want to respect people's privacy too. I think in e-commerce, we did encounter a fairly interesting scenario where, because one of the features of voice interfaces is that they're unconstrained. If you consider how much effort companies put into analyzing where the users click on a screen, and even, for example, in e-commerce, what products are people looking at, how much do people scroll, where do they click on the screen, these types of things, but it's all very constrained because of the visual interface. Whereas in the world of voice, and particularly with something like Voices Commerce, where consumers can just directly tell a a mobile app what type of products they're looking for, that type of information can actually be genuinely very useful for the retailers, because they can see if someone maybe does a search for a certain product, maybe then they click on a certain product, and then they actually ask it, oh, I want this, but in this different color, or I want a product like this that's a bit bigger. And so I think there's a whole world of possibilities for what analysis of voice interactions may be able to do in the future. We're not doing it initially with Voices Commerce, but I do think, in terms of the value that these types of interfaces provide, helping companies build better products and deliver a better experience is probably in everyone's interest. But the need for privacy, I think, is critical.
Yeah, no,
it's just about finding the right balance.
Sure. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And, the voice sector, really the charge has been led by Amazon in many ways, especially here in the US, but it's on the rise, of course, everywhere. And as you know, and I know, it's here to stay. It's not some sort of fad or whatever. This is a permanent shift that we're experiencing. And it's all happening so fast that we've really opened a Pandora's box of ethical concerns around privacy that I don't think a lot of people are thinking about. So then it becomes paramount just for companies like yours to advocate for the end user and think about stuff that they're not thinking about themselves.
Yeah, I think so. In the case of what we're doing, if we integrate into a mobile app or on a website, we're not doing always listening, which is something that has bigger privacy concerns. So if you take something like an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, them devices are always listening to people in their home.
Sure.
And I think the privacy concerns are much greater there. And I did hear at an academic conference recently that one of the big platform companies had done a study where, because these devices are always listening, and they're not just listening to voice, they listen to everything because it's just a microphone that records audio, and that it's quite straightforward to identify what TV channel is somebody watching, because the device can actually hear the audio from the TV.
Sure.
It also was possible to identify who was in any room at any point in time, because the microphone could hear the footsteps and timing of them, and people apparently have quite distinct footsteps. And so I think there's a whole world of privacy around them types of devices, and that isn't really being talked about that much right now.
Well, no, yeah, and you're touching on something that came up on an earlier episode, I think, of the VoiceFirst Roundtable, one of our VoiceFirst FM shows. The idea that actually it came up on the Voice of Healthcare as well. This idea that smart speakers can serve, and this just sort of is a great example of the duality of this technology. Smart speakers can serve as fantastic security devices for the home, because you give them a week or some amount of days, and they're going to determine the mean, the average volume in the house. They're going to ascertain that every day from about 6:42 p.m. to 7:15, there's a TV that's on that's 50 feet away. A mailman shows up at 1 p.m. They don't just listen, but the capability to document is also there. And so that's incredibly powerful. Like in the case of a senior citizen or somebody who, has trouble looking after themselves, if the Echo device, just to use that as an example, if the Echo device in that senior citizen's house does not hear, the bathroom being used 2.3 times a day, and that goes for 3 hours without hearing any activity in the home, well, there may be a problem. That person may be collapsed on the floor or something. So you take that and all of the potential to serve the human race, and then you look at it from the other direction of all the potential to betray the human race. And it becomes a fascinating discussion.
Yeah, I think ultimately it boils down to, can you trust the providers of them devices? It's inevitable that someday in the future there will be more transparent devices, but right now all of them devices are very, very closed platforms. Even if you may be able to add in some basic commands on any of them, but other than that, they're very, very closed platforms. There's no transparency to see. Even if when it listens by accident, people don't really have any visibility or any idea of how frequently does that occur and what exactly is being tracked in them audio recordings.
Let me ask you two more things and we'll wrap up, both of which related to news stories that we reported on This Week in Voice this week. The first one is that smart speaker purchases are up 300% in 2017. Yep. I think the number is 24.5 million that's projected at this point. Smart speakers sold across the world. And I want to ask you, I saw somebody, and I couldn't remember it the other day, I still can't remember it now, but some analyst was discussing the fact that he thought smart speakers were going to increase exponentially in terms of sales over the next 2 years, and then they're almost going to vanish just as quickly because they're going to get subsumed into other existing technology like appliances or what other existing hardware in the home or the office. Do you agree with that? And what do you think about the rise of smart speakers?
I could imagine that smart speakers will become less intrusive. Many of the devices to date have been fairly big and bulky, but it's hard to see them being integrated that much into external appliances because you're still going to need that microphone somewhere. And if it's in a small, non-intrusive device, ideally somewhere where you don't even have to locate it in a visible place, I could see it existing on its own. I think to date, from the original Amazon Echo only came out just over 2 years ago, and already the microphone technology being used in these devices has changed very dramatically from that to now. I'd even say in the past year, the microphone technology has changed quite dramatically. And I'd say, so particularly if the microphone technology keeps improving, then it's going to keep justifying people to have these devices. Although maybe one's more like the Amazon Echo Dot and the Google Home Mini, maybe the more popular devices because they're just smaller and less intrusive. And I don't see an advantage of adding that into some appliance if it makes that appliance less upgradable in the future, because you can buy these microphone devices for $40 at the moment.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about, there is an article from from last week that Brent Leary did with your colleague, Eric Biseglia. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yep.
And this is a great article. We're going to link to it in the show notes. One of the things that this article discusses or contemplates is what is the time frame that a retailer has to embrace voice technology before they sort of really start to shoot themselves in the foot. What is your perspective on that?
I think in the world of e-commerce, a lot of the retailers do seem quite progressive and they do want to move forward. But where voice is different from probably any of the technologies they've used to date, it takes a bit of trial and error to build a good voice interface. So even just from the user experience point of view alone, where is the best place to place a microphone icon? How do you teach the customer what's the capabilities of this microphone icon? How do you inform the customer when there's extra features or some functionality that may help them? For retailers, there's a lot of unknowns still, and now is the time to start figuring it out because things are moving very, very fast. And probably the best example of that is 2 years ago, nobody knew that they needed a smart speaker. Now look at the amount of people who have them, and it's only increasing, and it's increasing at an incredible speed. A customer will accept an unpolished experience now. If the voice interface will still save them, maybe 10x the amount of time. It does provide enough value, but we will see that certain retailers will start polishing their voice experiences pretty soon, and then the expectations will rise with that.
So your message to retailers is they need to go ahead and get on this now so they can, if not for any other reason, start learning the ropes.
Oh, absolutely, because I think in another even 12 months, it'll be too late to start thinking about it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think 2018 is going to be a transformative year, and you guys at Voisis are pretty well positioned to take advantage of it. Peter, thank you very, very much for setting your time aside to talk with me and share your wealth of experience with the audience.
Yeah, thank you. Enjoyed it.
For Artificial Intelligence, thank you for listening. Until next time.